Good morning. We're gathered today on the territory of the signatories to Treaty 7, and I acknowledge the Métis people of Alberta who share a deep connection and history with this land. I'm joined by our leader, Rachel Notley. With the UCP leadership race complete, it's time for the UCP government to finally look up from their politicking and focus on the people of this province and engage in some actionable governing. The centerpiece of the new Smith government is the so-called Sovereignty Act. Smith told her supporters the act would allow the provincial government to simply override or ignore federal laws the UCP doesn't like. This is not how federalism works in Canada, and it's certainly not how the rule of law works. It's absurd to even suggest that the government of Alberta is going to experiment with this kind of lawlessness has very real and very serious consequences. It will destroy investor confidence, and that will destroy jobs. It will stifle our economy at a critical moment. But you don't have to take my word for it. Brian Jean said the Sovereignty Act is nothing more than virtue signaling and a fiscal fairy tale that doesn't make any sense and won't work. Rajan Sani said the Sovereignty Act is, quote, an unconstitutional delusion that will lead the United Conservative Party and Alberta down a dangerous path. Rebecca Schultz called it the Anarchy Act, quote, a false dream that will turn into a nightmare. Travis Taves said the Sovereignty Act would put us backwards and it would create chaos. Jason Nixon called it very problematic and said it would break the law, spook the markets, and that it would be impossible to deliver on. Sonia Savage said Danielle Smith Act would, quote, create instability and chaos. It's already doing that. I had international investors concerned about their assets in Alberta, asking what's going on with it, end quote. This is more than just jostling in a leadership contest. These are dire economic warnings. They come from voices around the province in many different fields. But the ones I quoted from are both former and current UCP senior cabinet ministers. All of the people I've mentioned are also sitting MLAs, and that means they get a say in what happens next. To talk more about that, I'll invite our leader, Rachel Notley.
Thank you so much, Kathleen, for that helpful summary of the conversation up to date, or up to this point. The bottom line is that the Sovereignty Act is a recipe for chaos, for conflict, and for costs. The language that we've just heard from those UCP MLAs, well, it's very clear and it's very strong on exactly that point. And I actually commend them for taking that stand. But now it is time to back up those words with actions. Today, Kathleen and I have written to every member of the UCP caucus, and we have asked them to oppose the Sovereignty Act in the legislature. If they were speaking the truth on the leadership contest trail, the bottom line is they cannot allow this bill to pass. It is time to put province before party and to do the right thing. Kathleen's right. Our economy in Alberta depends on attracting billions of dollars in investment capital every year. And the folks who deploy that capital are looking for certainty and stability. The current energy minister, Sonia Savage, said that the Sovereignty Act is already sowing chaos and uncertainty amongst job creators and investors. If they see Alberta heading down a path of chaos and conflict under Danielle Smith, they will simply go elsewhere and they will create those jobs in other places. This at a time when Alberta is struggling, when Alberta workers are already struggling with the slowest wage growth in the country and the worst affordability crisis in 40 years. We can't allow that to happen. So I hope very much that there are enough UCP MLAs who are willing to join us in defeating this bill, protecting our energy sector, protecting emerging economic sectors, and most importantly, protecting Alberta jobs. Thank you, and we are happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thanks, and we'll start with questions in person.
I do a couple of questions. We have heard, I guess, the proposal for the Sovereignty Act changed several times. We've even heard the now Premier's team starting to walk back some of those proposals. Without fully knowing what this Sovereignty Act really is it too premature to say what the impacts could actually be if and when it's passed?
Well, I would say no, because quite honestly, the little bit of a flip-flop that we may or may not be seeing from one of Danielle Smith's senior political staff is a bizarre 180 from not only what she said throughout the campaign, but what he himself has put down on paper. And so the result of that is it actually fans the flames of the chaos, the uncertainty, and likely the failure to invest as a result. And so, quite honestly, if Danielle Smith and one of her most senior political advisors don't know what it is they're talking about, what that means is that foreign investors are not going to know what they're talking about. And as long as that's the case, there's no good version of this. If they don't believe that they're going to do what they said they were going to do up until the leadership vote, then they should just walk away from the whole thing altogether. And more importantly, UCP MLAs need to stand up for Albertans and demand that they do that.
I do have a separate question on a separate topic I can ask. We had a documentary we read yesterday showing ambulance wait times for serious medical calls can be anywhere from 80 minutes to 7.5 hours. In the Premier's victory speech, he mentioned preparing the EMS system with swift and decisive action. What do you think that decisive and swift action will look like under a Smith premiership, and what should it look like?
Well, I think first of all, she has to begin by talking to her health minister and together with him apologizing to Albertans for the mess that they have created through the actions that they have taken since they first got elected with respect to the ambulance system and the reorganization of it. Secondly, they need to listen to the message that's coming from EMS personnel themselves, that they need to be able to get off shift on time in order to keep the folks who are still working for us in that sector working there. They need to give them permanent contracts instead of treating them like disposable workers. And they need to support harm reduction efforts in order to reduce their workload. These are critical, important things that the frontline staff themselves have put forward. Finally, I think that all parties should come together and think about ways to reverse the bad decisions taken by the UCP and to find ways to give more local control to emergency responders in those communities that have been begging for it ever since the UCP started pushing this down communities' throats. It's very important that families can know that if there is an accident, if there is a serious illness in the family, that when they call for the ambulance, that it is there in time to get their loved ones or themselves the healthcare emergent help that they need.
Do one more check for questions in person. And I'll go to questions on the phone. Just a reminder to press star 9 if you're joining us on the phone, and use the raise hand function if you're joining us via Zoom. And seeing none, that's all for today. Thank you.
Thank you.